righty. We are, can we get the door closed, please? Thank you. Thank you. All right, we're back from recess. The time is 8:02 a.m. Today is Thursday, November 17th. This is day 2 of the Physical Therapy Board of California. We're meeting in the California Endowment in the Cabrillo Room located at 1000 North Alameda Street in Los Angeles. Could we please have roll call?
Katerina Ellaby.
Present.
Alicia Benamin.
Here.
Deborah Alviso.
Here.
Jesus Dominguez.
Present.
Daniel Drummer.
Present.
Tanya McMillian. Tanya McMillian. Oh, go ahead.
Ms. McMillian will be late this morning.
TJ Watkins.
Yeah.
All members are present with the exception of Tanya McMillian, and the board has a quorum.
Thank you, Brett. We're going to get started with agenda item number 10. And I believe, Jason, you're going to walk us through?
We're going to go over the census documentation. I think some of the members that are sitting on this side of the room should transition over to kind of form a horseshoe off the screen, and we can review the document we have been doing in the last couple of meetings. And I believe where we're going to pick up off since our last review is the enforcement section. Most of the section we've all had a chance to review, but to make sure that we get everything done in a timely manner, we'll start with enforcement. Unless in your review of the documentation, there's anything in particular in a section that you'd like to bring up, as soon as we're done with enforcement, we'll come back to that.
Okay. What page number is that?
It is page 53.
Sorry, where are we?
Section 5.
It was a Word document that was sent to us. I found something in table 1 that I had a question about.
Okay, as soon as we're done with the enforcement, we'll go back and go through the rest of the document.
Pages aren't numbered in the Word document, right? No. Just checking.
Yeah, 50 of 85, yeah. In the bottom right-hand corner is the line.
Got it, thank you.
Yeah, I just saw it.
I have 101.
Oh, that was the wrong one.
In the Word document, I have page 57 of 101. If other people have that same.
I want to make sure that you have the right version. That could be as simple as the way the program opened up your document and formatted it as far as line spacing and that kind of thing. But what was the data creation for that document? Can you? Or the simpler question, was it the document that we sent you prior to the meeting?
Yes,
Okay.
11B.
Okay.
1110.
Okay, let me get the right one.
You were looking at version 12 point, or draft 12.53 instead of 14.
We can get started, Jason.
Okay. So at this point in the review, this version of the draft for the enforcement section has been through a couple different iterations with staff, has had input from legal, and has had a cursory review by the board and a full review by the Sunset Subcommittee. But if there's anything in your review that you'd like, questions answered or comments made, we can start with it, with this particular section.
I just have a very global question. We define things, we define things by acronyms, and I think the CPEI has already been defined above. So, and we've done that. I've noticed that for a couple of terms that we've used throughout the document.
Yeah, as the style guide, the rule in the style guide that we created is that we would spell a title out completely at the beginning of each section.
Section, okay.
So based on the section, depending on, keeping in mind that as this report is distributed to the legislature, these sections are going to get split up and,
Perfect.
given to different analysts to address things. At least that gives them a fair
Yep.
way and not have to do too
So
much
then,
research
yep,
to figure
that's
out
fine then.
what we're talking about.
So at this point, are you looking for content?
Do I have it on? Thank you. At this point, are we looking for content, or are you also looking for little edits also?
A little bit of both. So this is one of the sections that we haven't had a whole lot of chance to look at as a group. Some of the grammatical things, some of the format things have still, you can kind of see as we're going through the document, the format is starting to come into play. So the remove and replace is happening where we've decided that it's going to be PTBC S with no apostrophe, just for a uniform standard. And we'll go through the document and do that, along with a litany, a list of other things that we're going to do that way. So unless there's a distinct grammatical error or something that you see, please do call it out. And then absolutely for content, conceptually at this point, this is the one, this is where we left off in the last review, to make sure that we are relaying to the legislature what this board intends.
Okay. So when you go to the individual performance measures, I would, again, it's tiny, but I would probably call them performance measure 1 instead of measures. You can turn it on. I'm trying to find where to tell you that I am. It's saying, page 61, number 34, question number 34.
Can we go back up to the introduction?
Sure. I didn't know what we were doing. So.
Yeah. So I'd like to ask whether the first 3 paragraphs, if you guys think those are necessary, or if there's perhaps a way to collapse those a bit. I think on some level we're trying to keep the length of the document as short as we can. I think this introduction is helpful, but I don't think it's actually answering the question. And I have some suggested revisions on how we can just collapse it a bit, if you guys are interested in. But I think it's important to get your feedback as to whether you think this is important information.
I'd like to collapse it.
All right, so what I'm suggesting is deleting paragraph 1 entirely. Deleting the next 2 sentences from line 36 through, up to 39. That next sentence is also out. So that section would now start as part of the CPEI, or I would insert the DCA's CPEI. Because above, it looked like you were trying to make sure that it was clear that it was DCA launching the CPEI. After that comma, then insert the PTBCs. Then that paragraph would stop on line 4 after months period. Delete that last sentence. And then delete that following paragraph.
So can I ask if someone, or Brooke, if you wouldn't mind just reading that now as it stands?
As part of the DCA CPI, PTBC's enforcement performance measures were developed to monitor and assist in determining the effectiveness of efforts to streamline enforcement processes, reduce backlogs, and achieve the overall goal to process complaints within 12 to 18 months.
So then I would suggest inserting a new paragraph to explain what the reader is about to see. So it would read, the enforcement process is comprised of several phases, colon. Complaints received, and then in paren, performance measure 1, in paren, semicolon, intake, paren, performance measure 2, end paren, semicolon, intake and investigations, paren, performance measure 3, end paren, semicolon, formal discipline, paren, performance measure 4, end paren, semicolon, probation intake, paren, performance measure 7, end paren, semicolon, and probation violation response, paren, performance measure 8, end paren, period.
Tara, I don't understand the colons and semicolons after the numbers.
We're setting up a list of what follows. So we can either take out the colon on line 14 and then just have commas between, or keep the colon and have semicolons between each phase.
That's good. Okay.
So then I would recommend taking out that next title, CPEI performance measures, because that's what this section is about. So then it goes into what process is monitored and how. So it's a PTBC analyst at all phases is monitoring. And then we go into the performance measures themselves.
I think I answered the question a little better.
Yeah, I think this revision gets to the crux of answering the question a little bit quicker, but it also explains what's about to come. Rather than just listing performance measures as separate titles, we can provide this list up front so the reader knows that, okay, these are the performance measures and this is the performance number that's coming. That's all I have for that section.
Deb, you said you had something under 34? Okay.
I'm going to keep scrolling until somebody stops me.
As you're scrolling, what can you just call out, because we're all looking at our own personal screens, can you just call out what performance?
Performance measure
just
3.
the titles so that so we know that we're all scrolling at the same rate.
Performance measure 4. Performance measure 7.
I had a question on 7. On my version anyway, it's line 21, but on yours it looks like it would be, that 104 licensees. I know we're talking about probationers, but should we make that comment? Monitoring all 104 licensees on probation? Does that clarify it, or just? Again, it's not critical. We know what we're talking about here, but.
Performance.
The probation monitor isn't monitoring anybody who's not on probation.
Correct.
Correct.
Right?
Performance measure 8.
On line 25, I think we can take out instead, comma.
So we're in 34 now. Correct?
Yes, correct, under 34, enforcement trends. Performance barriers.
I have so up in enforcement trends, I wanted to make sure that you're able to portray the activities that really occur. So on line, what's your line 28, where it says that the current address is vital, we've decided not to do anything about it. And so I thought it might be appropriate to consider a comment about that there's other ways that you've been addressing this through communication via social media, the new email address, that you also have other ways that you're able to maintain contact.
That's a good point. But past that even, if we come across incorrect address information as a result of another investigation, pending a different allegation or complaint, we'd also enforce it at that point too. So when there's real damages, if you will, to the board as far as costs increased as a result of investigation, trying to track somebody down, that becomes an inclusion.
I think I was thinking that there's two parts to it. One, that decreasing the emphasis on that, it more aligns with the DCA priority. And that there are other ways that it is vital, but there's other
Education,
ways
outreach.
that, and that, yes, that you take action when it's found as part of something else.
Okay.
talking about the statistics from 2013 and 14, should the word be included instead of includes? For instance, the total number of complaints filed in fiscal year 2013-14 reads includes actions, or did the total number of complaints included actions initiated by PTBC?
I think you're correct.
Is that line 58?
Under performance barriers?
Oh, no, I'm on the 11 further down. Further down. It says also, although the AG has persistently worked the PTBC cases, is it just PTBC cases? And taking out
Did you remove that?
I'm sorry, taking out the what?
the
Oh, that.
Well, we had the in front of all,
Yeah.
that's one of the,
As part of the style
Well,
guide.
I think you can take out the there because you're actually, the PTBC is a modifier for cases. It's not actually referring to the board itself.
okay.
Anything under improvement plan? Budget change proposals, consumer protection services. Legislation affecting enforcement procedures.
Brooke, I'm sorry, before this version of the draft was sent out to members and it was sent to the subcommittee and I submitted my comments, were those included or no? Do I need to go back and include those?
Yeah, they should.
They're in there?
Be
Okay.
in there now.
Thank you.
Are you not seeing them?
I don't know. I didn't cross-check the two documents, so.
I'll make sure.
Yeah, I'll look.
I've got a quick comment, just under legislation affecting enforcement procedures. Maybe this is a place to ask the question. In the beginning of this document, we define, or we give the acronym Physical Therapy Practice Act, we give the acronym ACT, and halfway through, we've changed it to Practice Act.
It's just a matter of applying the style guide throughout the whole document. We haven't reached that stage yet.
Okay, got it.
Regulatory actions affecting enforcement procedures.
On line 18, after regulation, insert was, then delete the model guidelines.
Did you just need to delete guidelines as well?
Yes. On line 25, after locating, insert A.
After? Sorry.
Yeah, after. On line 23, actually, you put it on 29, right at the beginning, put that. On line 38, after assist, before DCA, put the. On line 27, after DCAs, put the.
Wait, I have a question. Let me read that. Monthly meetings with DCAs, the legal counsel.
Oh, right, it should be the before DCAs, with the DCA's legal counsel. Thank you.
Oh, no problem. And then right above that, the Enforcement Academy focus group. Those two sentences there look like they say the same thing to me. And so I wanted to know if that was true, and if so, maybe one sentence about what the academy and what the improvement project was. It's in the focus group.
Paragraph above.
Oh, sorry. Thank you.
So do you guys, is that enough of a comment, or do you guys want to craft that? Are we trying to get her done?
Yeah. Yeah.
I've been choosing when to kind of make this comment, but just bring the magnifying glass back a little bit as far as detail and content and transition, just for time's sake. A lot of the formatting, the grammatical of that, while we appreciate it, I think it'll get caught up by the basic style guide that we've already chosen for these kind of things. This is a little bit more content, though. So this is one where I would say it's a board call at this point, if you'd like to change the content and talk about concept.
Would the second sentence be sufficient? Take out the first one?
Is,
Because basically that's what it was the redesigning of the Enforcement Academy.
were there more than just EOs and managers participating in this redesigning? Because that first sentence says PTBC staff. So is that more people than just the EOs?
Staff and manager, the focus group was,
It was more EOs.
but it was also comprised of DCA exec and D of I investigators and supervisors from their unit.
So as long as whomever from the PTBC is captured in that second sentence, presumably the EO.
It was myself and Jesse. We can just put the executive officer, the manager, or the CPS.
Just PTBC.
So take out staff?
I'm sorry, did you say it was executive officers and executive officer and managers?
Myself.
So maybe executive officers and managers assisted in the restructuring of the Enforcement Academy.
I think even more simply, and the point that I think we're trying to make is that this board participated in it.
Okay.
So you could relegate it to just PTBC participated.
Okay.
We had representation there. It's not really
Who?
relevant who. It was
Okay.
just more that there were some boards that were present and some boards that weren't.
And is the Enforcement Academy well-known enough that it doesn't need,
It's actually a result of the previous CPEI, so the legislature is aware of it.
Okay.
It was at their directive.
Is that okay?
Mm-hmm.
It's redundant.
On line 14, before PTBC, insert the.
Table 9A, enforcement statistics.
Brooke, what is SOI? I did a doc search, it's not defined anywhere, and I've forgotten.
That's a good point.
Statement of issues, where's
Got
that?
it, yeah.
Where is that? I'm sorry.
It's in the table, an acronym in the table itself, under license applications denied.
Oh, okay. I can put the first, after statement of issues final. I'll just spell it out. Yeah.
Yeah, there's plenty of room in the table.
Yeah.
Table 9B, enforcement statistics. Table 9C.
Go ahead.
Who is? I've got a comment on 9B.
I do too, go ahead.
Okay.
On 9B.
Yeah, in footnote 2,
Stipulations?
line 10, after available, that should just be a comma.
And then my question is in footnote 6, under the drug tests ordered 2015-16, and it has 487 total tests ordered. That doesn't match the table, and I just wanted to understand if I was misreading something.
The table, you're talking table...
Above it.
9B.
Yeah,
Correct?
yeah. Should it not match it?
No, because in 9B, those numbers were provided from First Lab.
That's what I thought, okay.
Yeah.
On line 2, do we need to take that bullet out, or is information missing?
Take out. No. How many years now?
14, 15? Oh, wait, no.
It's not
below.
missing, is you return to create a section, a separation between the two captures of data.
So we just need to remove the report.
Yeah.
Table 9C. Table 10, enforcement aging. Question 35.
At the, after that table, there's a paragraph. Yeah, let me just catch up on my own comment here. Oh, on line 3 up there, I was just going to suggest that maybe those two items get switched in order to more match the table better. Let me see why I said that.
So this table illustrates that 73% of the cases are investigated and final disciplinary action taken within 3 years, and 84% of the cases are investigated and closed within 1 year performance measure goal.
Yeah.
You want me to, I'll make a note just to switch it.
Oh, and so the 74, those numbers actually appear in the top half of that table? That's where I got this comment, this thought from. Those numbers are from the top half of that table. So I would suggest they switch.
Okay, I see what you're saying.
And then in that sentence where it says closed within the 1 year performance measure goal, I didn't know which performance measure goal is 1 year, because I didn't think we had one that was 1 year.
Gotcha. It's supposed to be within,
18 months.
yeah.
Is that the 540
Yeah.
or?
Yeah.
Should we say performance measure number 3 or whichever?
That's probably a clearer way to spell it out.
And then say 18.
Yeah.
Performance measure.
Or within 18 months, performance, which is performance measure.
Yep.
So then, do we need the sentence after the inversion here? Table 10 above illustrates the AG in investigations, case aging of the enforcement process. That's sort of an introductory statement. So now that we've got it further in the paragraph, do we either need it, or do we just put Table 10 illustrates that 84% of the cases are investigated?
Jesus, I didn't mean for the sentences to switch.
So just have it, okay.
Just the 73 and the 84 should appear differently.
Got it.
So I didn't mean to switch the order of the paragraph.
Okay, so.
Okay, now we get it.
Does that make sense?
Switch the numbers in
Yeah.
that sentence, yeah.
So how
Because
I
I
read
wasn't
it-
even looking at what you did,
yeah,
I just said,
How I read it before, though,
And then what number of performance measures?
just moving the two stats.
The two
in
stats.
sequence, yeah, okay.
okay.
On line 5, yeah, we need to delete and the comma and put a period.
To me,
Hold
it-
on.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I'm scrolling. Line 4, after years, put a comma and.
Take out above.
I've lost it now.
So where it says Table 10 above, it would be just to, Table 10 illustrates that 73% of the cases are investigated, if I understood before. So, yeah, so,
Yeah,
and
at
then leave
least-
illustrates, but then delete the AG on until that before 73%, yeah. Does that capture it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was.
And should that
yeah.
go before it? Or should the whole comments go before the table or after it?
I think that's something we've been, throughout the whole report, trying to figure out, should some of these things come before the table or after the table? We tried to apply a hard and fast rule, and it didn't quite,
It doesn't always fit. Yeah.
contextually, it doesn't work.
Yeah.
So, but,
Yeah, in the majority of research presentations, you have the narrative, the explanation,
Correct.
and then the table below supports what I've just told you.
And in the narrative, you really just draw attention to the table when you're trying to take the reader there, within the context of your narrative. I think that's okay.
Does the first sentence reads, it could be confusing to me, I can read it two ways. And I believe it's intended to mean that case aging continues through the phases of the enforcement process, through all of the phases of enforcement process, rather than case aging occurs at every phase. So to me, that could be interpreted that each phase has its own aging.
case aging is affected by every phase.
Something to that captures it, that it's throughout the life of the case, as opposed to at each piece where it's getting its own aging in each phase.
Yeah, I'm right on the edge where I'm almost like, that seems like such an obvious statement, but
Well, and that's what I'm worried about
Yeah.
because of who we're explaining this to.
Does it differ amongst the boards, or is it the same for all boards? Is case aging no matter what, or is this specific to us?
no matter what.
Well, then we don't even need to say it.
Simple and succinct.
So did you want to move that
Above the
starting,
table.
yeah. That's probably appropriate, because if we're calling attention to these numbers, we may as well put it before the table, so then
Yeah,
they
I
can see the
indicated
table.
as a note to consider for style guide is just go back anytime that there's a paragraph either above or below, reconsider whether it should be above or below.
Question 35.
I don't have a question. I don't have a question with the way it's written, I have a question understanding it. The question's asking increases or decreases in disciplinary actions since the last review. And we're saying, you know, what we've sent to the AG and what we've taken care of in-house. And the number of cases to the AG has decreased, but disciplinary action has increased as a result of CPEI standards. So just for me, how did CPEI standards increase disciplinary action?
Yeah, it's a hard thing to explain. Following the priority matrix more closely diverts resources to more sensitive and egregious cases.
Yes.
And so our resources are being spent at a more appropriate level as far as cases are concerned. And the end result is that it results in more disciplinary action. We're concentrating our efforts on things that are of a higher priority. So as a result of case aging going down, we're also having an increase in productivity, I guess is probably the best way to say it. So the end product has increased. Discipline cases themselves have gone up.
So we're catching more?
I think we're catching the same amount, but we're catching them in a shorter period of time.
More are getting through because of the CPI, as we're processing those that we're focusing more on. Those are getting through faster. So we were pushing a lot through the AG. So that's why the increase of cases were at the AG.
So is it that the time frame has shortened?
It has.
You have, things are more compact?
Right. So in a quarterly report, or even a yearly report for that matter, you'll see the discipline numbers go up because it's taking us a shorter period of time to get it done.
Got it. Got it.
So should we explain that? Because what we are saying is that the increase in priority or high priority cases, we are able to close them quicker because then that will explain the better management.
I mean, do we expect that number at some point to go down?
It is.
Yeah.
You will
So-
find that it's starting to go way down.
So it's not necessarily the increase in disciplinary action, or is it?
Well, it was a lot of the backlog, a lot of cases that were sitting, or not sitting, I should say, being investigated. We were trying to get those through, getting them pushed through as fast as we
Yeah.
can.
Yeah, it's
And
really a
so
combination.
you have that increase of cases going to the AG.
Right.
But now that we've gotten through that part of it, now you're going to find that it's decreasing.
Yeah.
The number is decreasing.
That would make sense. Yeah.
I think it does need a little explanation because you've talked about that the complaints have gone down. So I think you need to explain, I think I understand what you're saying, that that things are being, there's more activity.
Yeah, I think one of the things that gets missed in that statistic is the total number of complaints have gone down because we've taken things such as board actions or board-initiated complaints, as simple as a piece of return mail that initiates an investigation to see if there's an address change violation. And we've taken that out of the disciplinary process and dealt with it administratively and conducted it outside of the idea of that's a full-blown investigation that gets, statistically categorized in the same category as sexual misconduct. So those things have made that number go down as a result. And in doing that, the resources are more concentrated, along with the backlog in the AG, kind of a cleaning house mentality, if you will. They're catching up. They're taking everything that we did as a result of CPI, and they're getting it done. We'll try to craft an explanation for that change in prioritization and how it's affected the process.
Yeah.
Would the increase in reprioritization of disciplinary action explain that better? And then you keep the rest of it the same? Because it's the reprioritization that has created the improving performance.
Yeah, and I would just say to answer this question, that we look at the question and give them what they're asking for. Not that this doesn't, but, they want to know, what do our statistics show? And so if it's showing an increase, just a blurb about why, and then what we would expect to see.
Come on.
I think it's there for me. If we could we answer it by cutting out the first portion from 17 and above and say the disciplinary actions increased by 54% from such and such, and you have why is the next sentence. Like for me, just reading it over and over again, I can understand why. The top portion makes my mind think to something else. When I think it's more simpler, just it's increased. What do all, answering the question, what do overall statistics show as an increase or decrease? I think the answer's there already.
It seems to me that the last sentence relates to the first sentence. So perhaps the paragraph itself could be restructured. Because I think first we're saying that the cases sent to the AG has decreased. And then we're also saying that there are new CPEI standards and better management. All of it is part of the same initial difference since the last sunset review. New disciplinary action was implemented pursuant to the new CPEI standards, resulting in fewer cases transmitted to the AG. In comparison to the last sunset review, in fiscal year 2011, the pending cases with the AG has decreased. Do you see what I'm saying? It's like, I think we need to get the CPEI in there at the beginning, because that explains what we're about to say, which is there's been a decrease. These statistics show a decrease.
So if I'm understanding what this says, the cases sent to AG has decreased. But the final disciplinary actions has actually gone up,
It has.
which is that you've been working through. It's allowed cases that had aged to get processed.
These
Absolutely.
are cases that have been sitting at the AG. For instance, it was an average of 80-something cases sitting at the AGs. We're down to like 20-something. But everything has been being pushed through the AG because they're like Jason was saying, they're also trying to clean up their caseload.
Okay. And so seeing that number increase is the result of CPEI, all the changes. And I'll tell you, I didn't get that till I sat here and really read that a bunch of
Yeah,
times. So now I know what you're trying to say.
I think Tara's point that sequentially it's a little out of order in the sentences, so, and I agree with Liz, I think it's there. I think we just need to put it in a better sequential order.
So I think, to me, the best thing to do is to answer with the very first sentence of the paragraph. We should answer the question that's being asked. So what do overall stats show as to increases or decreases in disciplinary action? Since the last review, the PTBC has seen an increase, has had an increase in the number of cases resulting in disciplinary action. This is because the CPI and the AG's office pushing through old cases.
So you're going to dog-ear that, and then?
Yeah.
Yeah.
36.
Complaint in the 36th question.
Compliant.
It said compliant in the first line, to line 22.
Oh, it's just a typo.
It's not our typo.
Up in the,
Yeah, it's actually the question itself, Brooke.
up, in the question.
Yes.
First line of the question. Yep, there you go.
It says
Oh, thank
compliant,
you.
but it should-
It's hard to see.
What is our
here.
compliant prioritization?
Oh, man.
Move to the content.
Yes.
On line 35, the paren PC 23, that should come out because we're not actually referring to the penal code anywhere else.
$37.
On line 23, before DOJ, insert the.
Why are these questions highlighted?
These are the new questions for sunset.
Okay.
That's all they had in this, but we'll take all of that.
Yeah, it'll be removed.
Just curious.
The questions that are highlighted are different from this time last session, not necessarily different from our last sunset, but different from last year's sunset process. So there are a lot more differences from when we went through 5 years ago, but the value of the highlight too is to kind of see the legislative trend and what they're interested in looking at this year.
38. $39. $40. $41.
I had a note to myself in the paragraph that starts on line 34 that it might be worth mentioning also that that change is in accordance with the priority matrix. And if you didn't want to, if the purpose there is that had to do with staff, then I just think that it's also, it kind of affirms that it wasn't anything outside of recommendation either.
It's definitely a combination of the two.
Okay.
$42.
Did we state what types of violations are the basis for citation and fine?
I think I understand your question. We did, only because through our model guidelines, for each particular violation, it's a very wide range of how it can be handled. Almost every violation of the Practice Act can either be handled by a citation for the least egregious offenses in that category to revocation for the most And that's different from a lot of other boards that are a little bit more specific. If you looked at something like barber and cosmetology, where they really label things out with fines in advance and that kind of thing because it's appropriate, it's a little bit more difficult to do with healthcare and professional licensure of healthcare, where we say, well, we're going to rely on an expert consultant to opine and give us an opinion of how egregious this is. So some things are more commonly dealt with at the citation level, but practically anything can have a citation written for it. And conversely, anything could lead to, with a little bit of imagination, revocation. So it's just a very wide range.
What does this committee want to know? Why are they asking this? Do they want us to give them an idea of what we use it for, or does that not matter?
I think what they're really looking for is what's your statutory authority.
Okay.
So, and that paragraph is mapped out to show them that, based on the model guidelines, things can range from a minimum fine of $100 through citation all the way through revocation.
Got it.
$43. $44.
On line 15, before false statement, insert "or." And I'd like you guys to take a look at this to make sure that it should be "or" and not "and." I think you're effectively listing CC violations, so any one of these.
So, and/or?
Well, I use "and" if licensees were committing multiple of these particular violations.
It could be.
Sure, but I think the question is, what are your top 5? And number 3 is continuing competency violations, which looks like these items.
Okay.
I wonder if you really need the sentence about taking the approved courses, because failure to accumulate the required CC hours includes that.
All encompassing, yeah.
All the way down? Right here?
No, the other way. So failure to take approved courses is deleted. Yeah, that section.
So we should probably put after or a false statement.
Well, now that you've made the deletion, I'm more in line with the and/or.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just considering the cases that come across. Sometimes it's a combination of both, sometimes it's or.
$45. $46. $47. $48.
Just real quick, last time we met, we had talked about, I think it was this one, I didn't know my notes with me, but I think it was table 11, we had talked about moving it somewhere else. Was this the one? But I think it fits better in this one, in this question with number 48, because it wants to know how many and how much. Where we were moving it before, and like I said, I didn't bring my notes with me, but we talked about moving it somewhere else. So I left it with 48, just so you know, in case you look at your notes and you're wondering why it wasn't moved.
I think it fits here.
And the table still says list dollars and thousands. So if you're,
And
you
then,
must have recovered billions of dollars. See what I'm saying?
Yeah.
on amount of cost recovery ordered for fiscal year 2015-16, that number is, I think it has one too
There's an
many
extra digit.
digits.
Just highlight it and we'll confirm it.
15, 16, the table looks like.
Yeah, 290.
Oh, right there, 297.
And will you,
Okay.
Highlight that one.
To address the question of why your tables look slightly different than what's on the screen, after this was distributed, the formatting continued. Right, so only formatting, no change in content or anything like that. But that's why it took me a second to even realize, how come I'm seeing like light blue and that's our colors? But it was because staff was still, working on the formatting of the report before we came here.
and will you have something for that 15-16, that empty space, for cost recovery ordered?
Yes.
Okay.
In footnote 1, I think we need to replace boards with the PTPCs.
$49.
I have a question, and it's kind of about the table above, but it had to do with question 49. So in the table above, the difference between the potential and the ordered, could those be either revocations where it might be ordered, but it's not?
The number of potentials that I put in there,
Yeah,
those were cases that were forwarded over to AGs, because it can be a potential, we don't know.
okay.
And then the number of cost recovery ordered, those are the actual cases that included cost recovery.
So
From the AG.
So the difference between the two could be revocation, hardship, or they didn't result in?
Yeah, those are some of the contributing factors, but in all the cases that we send over, sometimes we know in advance that we're not going to be seeking full cost recovery. Sometimes the costs aren't in ratio or proportional to the investigation, but sometimes you just can't avoid that. A question arises, a variable comes up in the investigation, and the investigators have to pursue it, and costs incur. But looking at a big picture, we know it's an unreasonable cost. So we won't require it when we send it over, or we will, and an ALJ will take a look at it and say those are unreasonable costs given the type of case this is. And then if the respondent files a petition or a request for modification of or a reduction in that cost recovery for fiscal problems or inability to pay, hardship. So there's a litany of different reasons why that we'll never reach that kind of 100% cost recovery listed versus expenses in the cost recovery that are collectible. One of the greatest factors is we can receive an actual itemized billing statement from the AG. We can receive an itemized billing statement from the Division of Investigation. It's very difficult to do an itemized billing statement for board staff. And I might dispute the billing statement that I receive from the other two parties. So if there's something that I see that is a result of a mistake or a clerical error, and dispute it, it might take a while to resolve that. So while the AG has billed me for a certain amount of money and we're disputing that bill, it's still included in the statistic. It might not get corrected or it may never get corrected for that matter.
So question 49, although I think you've answered the question, I was also thinking that it's kind of the policy that you do seek cost recovery pretty consistently.
As a whole.
Yeah.
So that a statement, in general.
We got our IT guy at work.
A statement in general, just stating that when at all possible, we pursue cost recovery when appropriate.
I
I
think
mean,
that'd be good.
that's very, it summarizes how we handle it. And it may be different than some other boards. Some other boards do have categories of cases that they just, based on their legislative authority, do not or cannot pursue cost recovery.
And usually is it for PTAs that we're a little bit more lenient on the cost recovery?
Only in the sense that hardship becomes a little bit more of a real issue based on their scale of pay. So it's not particular that it's a case-by-case basis. There are certain areas in California where PTAs are compensated at a fairly significant rate. It's really that individual's request and able to prove any kind of hardship.
Sorry, this is probably a style guide issue, but table 11, the second footnote, the last four words. The License Practice Act, is that utilized? I don't remember seeing the License Practice Act.
It'll, based on the style guide, it would be changed to the act.
Thank you.
I just got a note from legal counsel to let the record show that Board Member Tanya McMillan is present. Good morning.
50?
On line 20, it says, "and he, PTBC." Let's just add a T.
$51?
Do we need to put the table there?
It's their table.
Yeah.
They want it there?
It's their table, so I have to include it.
You've answered the question.
Thank you.
We have taken liberties with their tables.
Yeah.
If we're not giving them any information,
Well,
why?
not just in color scheme, but we've added information, what we thought was, relevant to the question asked and that kind of thing. I don't object to deleting that table at all. I think you've answered the question just by stating we don't have the statutory authority to order restitution to the consumer.
And therefore,
The table numbers for the rest of
Yeah.
I would say that if they're
You
looking
just
for
wouldn't have
table
a
12, if they're looking for table 12, thumbing
Leave it.
through,
Yeah.
they're not going to see it.
And I would suggest instead of putting 0, because that indicates that no amount was ordered, to change it to NA, because we don't.
And that concludes the enforcement section.
And I have to say, you guys are doing a great job.
You take direction really well.
If you
It's like I
wanted,
didn't go that far.
if you wanted to take a bathroom break right now, I would be okay with it.
Maybe we do, we will, just rearrange a little bit.
All right.
So let's take a 10-minute recess and come back at 9:20. All right, we are back from recess. The time is 9:22 a.m. And I believe we were on section 6, about to start that section.
It's as good a place as any to start. So we finished with the enforcement review, which we hadn't really had a chance to review as we move up to this point. So we can pick up here. You guys are doing a great job. You moved through a lot of content within an hour or so. Section 6 has your input accounted for from the last meeting. But if there's anything, if you want to go through it, and if there's anything that you see that stands out, one of the major changes was just realigning and taking out the outline kind of idea and applying it to look more like the rest of the content of the report. And then again, the conceptual changes that were asked for.
'52. '53.
Sorry, going back to 52, I would suggest shifting the links, the hyperlinks to other websites, Facebook and Twitter are the things that I'm looking at, to the bottom of the list so that we're really, because we're talking about the PTB website, and so to hit the pieces, the core of what our website is, I think should be listed first, and then hyperlinks to other things can be mentioned, but they should be the last things. And in addition, there's a hyperlink to Breeze, right? And that could be added to this list. And the hyperlinks to Facebook and Twitter are on the homepage. They're not a separate entity and a separate section, the way that consumers is a separate section, or applicants ends up being a separate section.
'53. '54. '55.
55B, in our answer, we say that final disciplinary actions are provided quarterly in board meeting materials. Is that true? Yeah, okay.
It typically is. This is that quarterly meeting where it's not only because the enforcement unit, the application unit, and licensing unit reports aren't here.
Okay.
To kind of make way for our sunset reviews.
Got it.
Not for a typical meeting, it is.
I was thinking, I didn't know why the word future was there. So I was thinking that it would be clear to say all accusations and final disciplinary documents are made available through license lookup. Is that true?
I'm sorry.
Oh, not all accusations, but all documents relative to final disciplinary actions.
Yeah.
Yeah, because the rest of the sentence is in past tense, when you're talking about future stuff.
I would say that an accusation can be pending. At the very least, you are posting the accusations because those are a formal disciplinary action. You've filed a document, a formal document. So you could say all accusations and final disciplinary action.
But, go ahead.
Yeah, but to say future accusations are posted, not quite yet, right?
Yeah, I think.
Future implies will be posted.
I think future is a confusing descriptor, but I guess what I'm looking at,
Subsequent, maybe?
there is a potential that I think all accusations is inaccurate also, because as an accusation is found to be meritless or baseless, an ALJ and both the board decide that there's nothing to do, that accusation should be taken down. You know, no actual harm has been found.
So
Did
then
it result in discipline?
I would say the question would then be, as long as the board is compliant with the DCA's website posting. If you're then taking the meritless accusation down, then you are compliant.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I would say that you
I guess what I want to make sure is that I would still leave pending, all pending accusations and all final disciplinary action. To say all accusations, I think would be inaccurate.
But they are specifically in the question asking, are we doing this in consistent with?
Do we even need all pending?
I know,
Why can't
we either
just-
are or we're not.
Why can't we just start it off with accusations and all final disciplinary actions are posted? Because that's what it is. We post all accusations, we post all disciplinary actions.
And we are.
But then there are those that are, the accusation, if are without merit, those are pulled off. So there was an accusation, but it was determined that there was no merit to
So I-
follow with discipline. So
I guess it's the way you look at it. It was posted at one point,
Right.
and then it was taken down.
But it's just asking, does the board post accusations?
What does the committee want to know? What are they
consistent
asking?
with.
Yeah.
I would also say that I wouldn't use pending accusations because even after a final disciplinary action that has been substantiated,
accusation's still
the accusation is still up there.
Yeah. I'm convinced.
I would take out all before final on line 6.
And we could include a sentence that says, accusations that are determined to be without merit are removed. So then it helps to explain that not all of the accusations are maintained. That,
Is the action that Daniel just described consistent with the DCA's?
It is.
Well, then, let's just answer the question.
Yeah.
We do.
Consistent with DCA's website posting of accusations, all, yeah.
So you want to include,
I think it's good. I think it's fine the way it is. I think it's a good point, Daniel, but I don't know that it,
it's necessary.
yeah.
56? $57? Section 7, online practice issues. Section 8, workforce development and job creation. Question 59.
Line 26 before PTBC, insert the.
We're saying in the first paragraph that until we have concrete current information on the size and distribution, determining a need is difficult. We don't need to go into great detail, but I just wonder if with the implementation of Breeze, we have a capacity or capability to capture more data as far as, PTs per capita in certain counties of California or zip codes or
Yes and no. So there's not much difference between what the legacy system captured and what Breeze captures. One of the difficulties that we had in legacy is this board requires two different address types in regulation, that of a residence address and that of a official address or address of record for mailing. That doesn't state to where they work.
That's right.
And so they can cross county lines, they can cross zip code lines and those kind of things. So that data is helpful, but it's not empirical. It's not a definitive. And we have that same difficulty in Breeze. And I don't know that that's a bad thing necessarily. It gives you an idea where people are located, but an address of record can be in LA County, but that PT could be residing in Florida. So it's just, as long as we're mindful of those kind of statistics and those kind of anomalies, the data needs to be looked at considering that.
Okay.
I have a quick question. So we're in section 8, which is workforce development and job creation. Sorry. We're in section 8, which is workforce development and job creation. And then my question would be, with respect to our answer to 60, the question reads, describe any assessment the board has conducted on the impact of licensing delays. And then we answer, the PTBC has not conducted an assessment on the impact of licensing delays on job creation. Do we need to mention impact on work development? Do we need to even have, we seem to single out job creation without mentioning work development. Do we even need to single that out? Yeah.
We took the answer one step further than the question.
Yeah. We haven't conducted any assessments in either.
Either.
Yeah.
So he's saying
Just a
add
question.
workforce development and job creation.
Sure. Or omitting job creation.
I'm just posing the question.
So the answer would be no.
I feel like you've been waiting to say that. We'll add workforce development to it. I think it's easier just to add workforce development to be consistent with the question.
The first sentence in 61, I think that needs a little attention. It's not clear from that sentence what the PTBC is doing. So I'm thinking that perhaps we could instead say the PTBC is regularly invited by schools to address questions from. So at this point, Brooke, you can start deleting typically when through, right there, yeah.
Tara, before we go too far into those, can you look at the sequence of the paragraphs in the answer? Because I think for this particular question, the third paragraph might be the paragraph we should start off with.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So maybe delete that first sentence entirely.
Yeah, one of our greatest efforts for outreach is by conducting board meetings at educational institutions to give the students those experiences and provide access.
So do you want to move that third paragraph to the beginning of that answer?
Yeah.
I actually would say no, because the question is about how is the board looking to inform applicants or the future applicants on the process. And I think that having a board meeting at an education institution is a secondary means for trying to achieve this, helping to improve, because we're not talking to anybody about the licensing process when we're in a board meeting. I think that it's informing them about the work of the board overall, but it's not addressing the licensing requirements and the licensing process, which is what 61 is particularly asking for.
So I guess that's a great point, because really what you are doing is separately holding board meetings at schools, but the EO and other staff are being invited.
And in those board meetings, we do, when we have an audience and when it's appropriate. So as an example, a board meeting at Loma Linda might start at 9 o'clock, but we'll go in and do a demonstration for the students the hour before the meeting and that kind of thing. So we do, when we can, take advantage of that. But I appreciate the point, because it is secondary. It's not the primary source of communication.
Is it also appropriate as well to mention that the travel restrictions have had an impact on the board's ability to do this kind of outreach?
It is, the secondary is a result. I mean, it's kind of, we realize that face-to-face, that one-on-one with the schools is so important that we've actually altered our board meeting calendars to account for it as a result of our inability to travel for individual schools.
So maybe things stay in the order, but the first sentence is something like PTBC receives requests to, provide this information. When the attendance,
I think the other part of it is that what's missing is just the constant contact between board staff and PT directors and those kind of things, and updates and the database that we rely on. So we'll include that as well.
Have you ever had a convening of like individuals who represent each of the schools and like the PT board?
No, not that we'd ever wished for or thought about doing it. It's just, that would be, logistically, it would be really difficult to do. We could put out the invitation. I just wonder what the attendance would be like.
Well, and a suggestion would be to try to coordinate with the CPTA when they coordinate the, when they provide the student conclave
Yep.
in the state of California, which could be a great opportunity to be able to invite educators, some people, members from the institutions, to be able to participate to get that information. But there's also I believe there's Northern California Clinical Consortium and Southern California Clinical Consortiums, which are groups of educators that primarily focus on the clinical education side of the student's education. So that might be another avenue, another group or two groups to be able to try to meet with to address some of these questions and the issues.
The other thing and that would be another addition to this section too, is that we do participate with CPTA Student Conclave in presenting as a board, so we'll add that as well.
On line 15, after system, there's a space between the comma.
I'm sorry, what number?
Line 15, after system.
I wanted to find out if the board or executive officer thought there should be a comment about the influence of fixed date testing here. I don't know whether it has really borne out as being any kind of a barrier.
I think it's worth mentioning, after the implementation of fixed date testing and when we actually took the time to look at the data, we realized that most applicants prior to fixed date testing, during the period of continuous testing, still took about 45 days after initial application of licensure to go and just actually take their examination, which is really close to the window in between and when applications hit. So it has an impact. I guess selfishly for staff, I want to say the impact is almost more administrative than it does actually affect the applicant, but it does have an impact. There's no denying that. I think that could be a really simple paragraph too.
Yeah. It may be that it's only
When it started and
yeah, but
Yeah.
it's more
Limiting.
It seems to be more one of flexibility than real timing at
Yep.
this point.
Can I make a comment on that? I do get students, graduates who've taken the NPTE do reach out to me when they are residents that are expected to start a residency program associated with the academic year, which is usually sometime in August, and they're waiting for their official license to come through, so it can't delay their residency. A subset.
Yep.
Can we go back up to a couple paragraphs before 62? So, On line 24, students to inquire the PTB staff directly is a little funky.
Oh, yeah.
So I was thinking we could delete inquire the PTB staff directly regarding, and instead say discuss. And then it goes on to application requirements, licensing process, et cetera, comma, directly with the PTBC staff.
It's like she works with words all the time.
Then on line 39, I think at that point with TOEFL, we need to spell it out, that first instance of TOEFL. You could just highlight it and put a
Yeah, it
comment
helps
to
us
spell
catching
out.
it when we do the style guide.
But along the same lines, the line 36, Physical Therapy Practice Act, I think it's the first time it's been mentioned in this section. I'm not sure we mention act again, but
On line 21, therapist should be therapists, plural.
Jason, can you tell me what the purpose of question 63 is? What do they want to know and why?
Can you scroll down to that question?
Why is it important for them to know about whether or not we collect workforce data and
Yeah.
shortages and training programs?
Just keeping in mind that this template is generic to that of the whole of the Department of Consumer Affairs. And
Right.
so some boards and bureaus have statutory mandates to collect this data. Board of Registered Nursing is a really good example where, as a result of a shortage identified about 15 years ago, they were required to participate in workforce shortages and data. And so they have explicit authority stated in their Practice Act to collect certain demographic information to address those deficiencies.
And then do they also have ability to make changes or to do things to be able to facilitate improving
change,
those
sure.
changes so that
Whole-
they're...
Whole programs, including funding.
So there's a difference between what is required of physical therapists and physical therapist assistants by our Practice Act to be able to apply. And so being able to impact the workforce on our part is really...
The authority's not there yet, and that's kind of the reactionary aspect of legislation and regulation and that's registered nursing, again, is probably the best example. They had a real identified problem to address, to the point that it had to be addressed by the legislature, who went in, amended the Practice Act for that board, and created authority for them to act.
And then, because of the projected growth of PTs and PTAs graduating from programs, to me that indirectly implies that there is a shortage, that there's going to be that much growth capable of happening. And so right now, we're lacking that many licensed individuals in the country because they're going to be filling those positions. They're going to be graduating, they're going to have jobs. They're going to have opportunity to be able to provide services. So if it was growing but there wasn't a need, then there wouldn't be then there really wouldn't be a growth.
Yeah.
That wouldn't be projected, or it shouldn't be.
And there's a very fine line between just market growth and market demand, and workforce studies identifying specific demographic issues or problems within the workforce.
Right.
And that's what I'm more concerned with, is we don't know we have a problem because we aren't looking at it, you know? And so I was just wondering if that was, I mean, like you said, this is DCA-wide, but I was just wondering if, you know, that was any of their intent in asking this question.
Sorry, Alicia, and you mean, we don't know, the PT board, this board doesn't know, because this board doesn't actively look at these numbers and try to analyze.
Yeah.
We don't know who's underserved, who's not, who's, you know, satiated,
Right.
or, yeah.
And I think that, I mean, part of the reason is because we don't have statutory authority to look at it, so there's not.
Some of that data we're
there's
not even
a-
allowed to collect.
There's not a drive for us to look at things that,
Right.
while they're informative, there's no action that we can really take to impact.
Can I make a suggestion? Our response to 63 sub A workforce shortages, instead of do not have, do not collect, we're not really collecting the data. Or we say PTBC does not have data. Should we say collect?
If you really want to call it out clearly for what it is, the PTBC does not have the statutory authority to collect data indicating,
Yeah.
or
Just-
data that might.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's
I didn't
really,
mean to imply that we're not, you know, due diligence and,
for the state of California,
Correct.
we do pay attention to U.S. Bureau of Labor and Statistics.
However.
Yeah, that informs us of general trends.
I think you and I had this conversation at the FSBPT conference about potentially using their zip code in their application, but then that doesn't necessarily reflect where they work.
Yeah.
But it would give a general idea of potentially county data.
I'm thinking instead of that sentence that you just altered, instead of it ending with shortage, maybe status? There's something that reads kind of
Indicating
funny
is
about
not
the
the
way
right
it is
word
right
either.
now. Or, the PTBC does not have the statutory authority to collect data on workforce status or something, or
There is a section here that we can add. So while we don't have the statutory authority to collect this data, we do have collaboration with a group out of OSHPAD called the Health Professions Education Foundation, who's identified underserved areas for a number of different types of healthcare practitioners and have offered loan repayment programs for practitioners to come into those areas, receive a benefit towards their loan repayment as long as they stay within that area for a certain amount of time, and also towards college tuition if they agree upon graduation to serve in those areas for a certain amount of time. I have some information from that organization that I can include in here as well.
Again, I want to be careful to not include too much information for a topic that this board really doesn't have the ability to impact. I want to be, that if we start putting too much information, then I'm worried that somebody's going to get lost in it, and then it's a section that we potentially have trouble with.
It might be a greater impact to just state the obvious.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, we found creative ways to do what we can to get around it, but we don't want that to be seen as a reason not to have the authority changed. Okay.
On line 33, at the end of that sentence, we need an S.
I would like to consider adding, currently there are 15 accredited professional physical therapist education programs, or doctorate level physical therapy education program, something that comments
Calls
on
it
because the heading training program is,
Duly noted.
Yeah.
Do you want me to put a comment here, or is there something you want?
Add doctorate. Or just as a comment, though. We'll have to confirm that all 15 offer.
I would say that the usual term is Doctor of Physical Therapy Programs. Their education programs would be fine as well, Brooke.
Okay, I'll leave both again. Section 9, question 59.
Line 2, at the beginning of that sentence, I think it might just read better if we insert in April 2013, comma. Then on line 3, before 5th, delete the period. And then delete on line 4, yeah, all of that. And just put a period. On line 10, implemented, I think that should probably be established. Wait. The DCA established the CPEI, is that correct? Reject both of those changes. But I'm wondering if we should insert implemented the DCA's initiative. Also, I think the font level is off on that regulation citation. On line 20, please stop me if I'm going too fast. Line 20 after house, put training. It was a really long sentence and I wasn't really clear what was happening. Attended in-house and DCAs, blah, blah, because you don't get training until the end of that sentence.
Oh, it's not house training. There's in.
Right, actually,
Wait a minute.
keep in-house training. It's just split
Sorry,
up.
Brooke.
Yeah.
That's okay.
Smart Alec, don't listen to me. I'm going to turn my mic.
So undo. What we need now is at the beginning of on line 20 in training, insert in-house. On line 31 in front of DCAs, put the on line 34 after EG period, put a comma. On line 39, legacy, does that need a capital L? Is that a known term?
It is. I agree.
On line 2, Department of Consumer Affairs, we need to delete that and just say DCAs. Wait, so now back up and insert boards after DCAs.
Capital, lowercase.
Probably uppercase.
Okay.
So on line 6, after web, should we insert website? And I think this is something, a global change might be necessary. Website sometimes has a space between it, sometimes it's not capital. Yeah, just a global note.
Yeah, it would have to be web.
Yeah.
Yeah, internet might be a better term, only in that if it's not, ours is just a doorway, if you will, or a portal to the access of that technology, so.
I'd probably put capital I.
What question number is that we were just working on?
62.
What happened to the rest of it? 63, 64, 65, 66?
We're not there yet.
Oh, well, that's before section 10, isn't it?
Oh.
Yeah.
Are we missing sections?
With some questions? So I have 63, 64, 65, 66, and then section 10. It's not in the current,
I think your numbers are off.
well, I'm looking at the draft from 11.8. I'm not looking at the draft from 11.10.
I'm confirming right now just against the original template.
Yeah, section, it's on 63 and then it starts on 69, starts on back to 59 to 60. And then
62 is the board utilizing Breeze.
I don't see it on the template. All right. I think that's 64, 65, 65. It's just different numbers, it looks like.
And there's a possibility just that in the cut and pasting of splitting and putting it back, that the numbering needs to be looked at, but, is it?
Yeah, because it goes from 63 in section 8
Yeah.
to 59 in
Yeah.
9. So I just
Okay.
pulled up the template and
Yeah.
we're addressing all of the questions.
The next section, section 9, current issues, starts with question 64.
Should be.
So where did we leave off?
So we're on track. So where it says 69, that's the error. It should actually say 64.
Okay. So,
So you're at the end of section 9, whatever number it is.
And then we'll go into section 10.
so going back up to the second question of 69, of section 9,
Right here,
what is the status of the board's implementation of CPI? Okay.
which one?
What is the status?
Yeah, that one's 64. I changed that, right?
Okay.
And then it goes into 65, 66, 67, A and B.
Just ensure.
Thank you.
all on the same page now?
Which page are we on?
Yeah.
Section 9. current
Okay,
issues.
okay, now I see, I'm sorry. Okay.
This section is current issues that the legislature has identified as being directed department-wide. All different of the departments are affected by all three of these questions.
Question, or former question 59? And sorry if you guys already addressed just the point fifth edition? Yeah.
At the end.
Just a half.
4.5
half of it.
editions.
Changes. 67.
Sorry, it's your new 67.
New 67, yes.
And
Utilizing Breeze. What release? What's the status of the board's change requests? Section 10.
On line 22 through 23, I think that first sentence just needs to be aimed at staffing deficiencies because the last sentence of that paragraph talks about the budget deficiency. So what I'm recommending is on line 22, take out, strike A before staffing on line 22. And then change deficiency to deficiencies, because I think there are multiple. Take out and budget. And take out deficiency there. And then it just reads, there's staffing deficiencies in the CPS program. In addition, the PTBC projected a budget deficit as its fund was depleting to unsafe levels.
And with those changes, I would suggest in the title, where we have issue number 1, changing that to say staffing deficiency and lack of fiscal soundness. Lack of staff doesn't, to me, that doesn't play right.
So
Staffing deficiency, because that's what we're using that terminology below. And lack of fiscal soundness. Or uncertain fiscal soundness, which better describes.
The issue number 1 and what it's titled is actually a repeat from the last Sunset report, so it's a direct quote.
So no on these changes?
Since we're in, I'm sorry, are we done with that one?
No?
No, I mean with what Brooke just, are you done, Brooke?
yeah, she had been.
Okay, sorry. So we're in the new section 10, line 30, Physical Therapy Practice Act, just act, because we refer to it later on in this same section. Or
Oh,
yeah,
correct.
just act afterwards.
I'm also wondering why we need chapter 5.7 there, because if they don't know where the Practice Act is by section 10. On line 32, consumer protection, insert enforcement. Line 38, after investigator, insert paren, capital S, capital I in paren. On line 37, remove the comma from AGPA. Oh. Line 35. I think that sentence needs to read, as a result, the PTBC was, as part of the CPEI, I think we need to strike the DCA identified that. So it should just read, as part of the CPEI, additional resources would be required in order to implement the CPEI effectively.
Why say as part of it? Maybe just additional resources will be required to implement the CPEI effectively.
Yeah.
Yeah, is it
Or it was
repeat,
determined.
repeat CPEI. Yeah.
On line 19, I think we need to move some things around in this first sentence. So I would cut to corrected staffing deficiency, cut that temporarily, and we're going to move it. And then start with a capital T. So it would read, the PTBC requested approval for 3 additional positions, and that's where we'll insert to corrected staffing deficiencies. Deficiencies plural, and then and then delete 2. There were just too many 2s and
Clause after clause after.
also on line 22, the committee, that's confusing. I don't know which committee we're talking about. So is it the Assembly and Senate Business and Professions committees? Is it a joint committee? What committee is that?
At the time, it was a joint committee. We'll go back and look at the formal title of the committee at the time. It's changed in the last 5 years, so.
On line 29, after insolvency, I think we need a comma, which the committee subsequently recommended. And then take out that next sentence. That's because we requested loan repayment and the committee then recommended it. I don't think we need 2 sentences to say that. Line 35. I think we need to strike 2 at the very beginning of that paragraph. And then we're going to move correct its budget deficiency for AG costs, comma. So cut that temporarily. Cut. Then delete the comma, capital T on the. PTBC insert also before requested. On 36, it says augmentation in paren 2, that's where we'll add correct. So after 2, they'll say 2, correct. It's budget deficiency for AG costs. Yeah, you could delete accommodate and, let's see, for its AG costs.
For enforcement, instead of, for its AG costs for enforcement? Could that be, would that streamline that a little bit? At the end of the sentence?
So strike associated with and insert for.
Or for its AG costs.
I mean, I think I like associated with because then we just have too many fors.
Maybe just enforcement then. Maybe it doesn't need caseload. And I had a question, which is, what year are you talking about here? And is it is it last sunset? I lost my time frame when I was reading
Should they
this.
strike the enforcement? 'Cause then-
Yeah.
Well, okay, we'll add that as a frame of reference.
I'm sorry, I missed that last one, was it?
Add a comment to add time frame. When was it added?
On line 38, the for, I think, should be that. In response, the committee recommended that.
Issue 2?
On line 11, under a name other than that, to which a license was issued, it probably should be for instead of to. Is that right? Does that make sense? Because it's, the license was issued under a name. Okay. On line 12, I'm thinking perhaps we need to delete had recommended here. And instead insert, although committee staff determined. And then later in that sentence, on line 14, after and on line 14, comma, instead, comma, conducted, and then delete determined that conducting a more. So conducted an is an, no D.
Line above of your first edition before instead. That and in front of instead should be just an and.
No. Undo.
Conduct and.
Oh.
Thank you.
So,
For the requirement.
yeah, reject that change. We need to keep that and. Then,
So in line 12, did the committee staff determine or recommend something to the board? I mean, we changed recommended, but,
No, that's why I agree with the change, is that it wasn't a recommendation to do anything.
Okay.
The Sunset Committee really opined that there was no reason that the board shouldn't be able to if they wanted to.
okay.
Is this a place that that reference to committee needs to be cleaned up to?
But I believe in this section, when we title it, we'll put committee in parens.
Okay.
So that it'll be continuous through, because we will, it's a very long title.
On line 16, after the PTBC, I think we need to insert concluded that. And then strike was able to justify the necessity of having. Delete all of that.
Delete it to where? Unable to justify.
Through having, yeah. And then at the end of that sentence, was unnecessary. So, will you go back to having? Let's just make sure that G comes out too. Line 19, physical is misspelled.
Physical. I guess that would be one of the major changes.
Came from them. but on that
Line
side.
22 to 23,
Sorry, I need to go back up. The board not to proceed with the board was not yet prepared to codify the requirement and instead conducted an in-depth analysis of the application and implementation of this concept was required.
Was required needs to be struck.
Yep.
You move the tense further up in the sentence.
Okay.
On line 30, that task force, did it have board members too? And do we want to include that or just licensees?
Well, since you asked, I think the clarity needs to be made.
I think there were.
Oh,
That
there
was-
were,
okay.
absolutely.
So my comment on this issue is that I don't think these two paragraphs, or really most of the paragraphs under this section actually answers the question. Because we've already substantially revised it. So the question is, does it need to be substantially revised? I think the answer is no, and then we say, we've already done that.
But this was a question from the
This is the
last-
follow-up. So these were issues previously identified in the last sunset. And then categorically, out of the issues that came out of that sunset, we've been addressing them.
Okay.
So issue number 3 was that question at the time. The result of that issue at the time in 2005 was the creation of SB 198.
But maybe all this history isn't necessary. That maybe the answer is, as a result of the last sunset, those things have occurred.
Right. My suggestion, if I may just read this.
Sure.
Perhaps we could instead insert, no, semicolon, the Practice Act was repealed, revised, and recast under the PTBC's last sunset bill, SB 198, effective January 1, 2014. Next sentence, SB 198 represented the PTBC's 10-year efforts of working with stakeholders to make the Practice Act less complex and easier to use, period.
I think structurally and organizationally, I agree with you. I just don't want to start the sentence with no.
Okay.
I mean, I
Yeah.
think the response is appropriate.
So if you took out no, what would it say?
It would say the Practice Act was recently.
Yeah.
There you go.
Before we get too far, if I may,
Mhm.
or just looking at the format, let's just put it out. There is another question, it's like 1, 2, 3. It does request some background on the issue.
Right, which I think we're providing by just saying we just did this under 198, the last sunset bill. So we're effectively just referring back to we've done it, and this is when.
Do you want to come to the microphone and read the questions?
They're at the beginning of the section.
Well, but the part that's missing is that this is the opportunity for the board to inform the committee of solutions to issues identified by the board and the committees. Actually, I'm on one section too far ahead. Include the following. Number 1 is background information concerning the issue as it pertains to the board. 2, short discussion of recommendations made by the committee during and prior sunset review. What action the board took in response to the recommendations or findings made under prior sunset review. And 4, any recommendations the board has for dealing with the issue. And the 4 sub-guidelines, if you will, are really labeled for kind of a general plan to address anything that was. And so the sunset bill itself and how SB 198 is structured a little bit different than some of the typical issues you might see that required legislative change, or where the Sunset Committee instructed a particular board or bureau to go back and do an assessment or do a study or come back with more information or things like that. It had more finality to it. We asked for something, we had it prepared, they adopted it and they put it in. So I think we can address all 4 sections of that question with a little bit more concise response, but
I think my concern is that this background that we have in here right now is prior to the last sunset. So,
as a result of the last sunset review,
right, something
the
happened.
Practice Act was amended in
Yep.
SB 198, which included the board's requests. I mean, it's something a little bit more summary.
Mhm. So let me.
Well, that's the thing with this one is that-
Stop. I'm sorry.
Oh, no,
I
I'm
just
sorry.
meant like, don't type anywhere. Please continue.
Do you want us to craft another response for the next meeting, or do you want to hammer it out here? Well, we have time.
I think she always has it.
Yeah? Okay. Go, Tara.
Let me, I'll read out what I've written down and then we can tweak it.
Okay, so do you want me to wait to type then?
I'll read right now. Was recently, okay. Repealed, comma, revised, comma, and recast under. And here, since we've already said as a result of the last census review, I'm not sure if we need this, but we could strike it. The PTBC's last sunset bill, comma, SB 198, comma, effective January 1, 2014, period. SB 198 represented the PTBC's 10-year, so it's a 10-year efforts of working with stakeholders to make the Practice Act less complex and easier to use, period.
Was our Sunset Bill 198?
It was.
I mean, what was 198 the act? Were those separate?
No, they're combined. There was a recommendation that they should be combined, in case there was anything that was controversial that might interfere with the bill being passed, and then we would be relegated to a bureau. But ultimately, it was all cast in the same bill.
I'd put a comma on line 22 after review.
Is the word recently in that first line necessary?
No.
I like it.
I'm
I
dropping
think it's a
bombs.
good flow.
Do we need the second sentence? Because the first sentence is includes the words, make it less complex, easier to use. So then do we need to say, in response to public and licensee concerns, that it was
Yeah.
complex and difficult to use?
If I understand Tara's edit, that's the answer, and the rest is struck.
Yes,
Okay.
Striking everything,
Right.
task force, everything.
right. I mean, I appreciate shout outs to Senators Price and Liu, but I think both of them are no longer with the legislature, so not sure how helpful that is.
Section 11.
So this section is new. There's a lot of new information in here since our last review. And I do have several structure suggestions, which I'm not sure if, perhaps it would just, from my perspective, be better to provide that information or those suggestions to committee staff or board staff to apply to the report for the November 28 review.
So the way that the information's organized?
Yeah, I've got, sentence restructuring, and so maybe I'll reserve my comments with the expectation that I'll provide that to the board staff, and you guys can really focus in on section 11 at the next
Okay.
meeting.
I had questions, and I think
Okay.
Deborah, do you want to bring up your questions now?
I don't have specific ones. I think it was more the organization of the material. And so if Tara wants to do that, that's fine. And we're just talking about number one. We'll pick back up with number two.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just reading the first sentence of number one, during its last sunset review report, should either be during its last sunset review or in its sunset review report, not during the report.
Agreed. Probably strike report.
So then we'll look forward to seeing what you have for us on the 28th.
Edge of my seat.
I do think it's important if you have general concepts that you don't feel are captured or need to be clarified, we should definitely discuss that to make sure that we adequately address it in the next review.
And just in the second paragraph, just to be clear, that we have experienced a proportional increase in workload throughout all program areas. 'Cause otherwise, it's just an increase overall, and I'm like, well, did we experience a financial increase that helped to support that workload increase? No, but,
In part. So as the licensing population grows, the revenue from renewal fees grows. But
the overall increase in workload has not really helped to address the shortages that we have, the deficiencies that we have.
correct.
Also, you'll notice that there are some tables that'll be inserted at the next meeting, so I think that with the tables present and some restructuring, it'll make a lot more sense with our next review.
Do you want to move on to question 2?
Yeah.
Okay.
So issue number 1, updating fee statute.
Line 36, after PTBC, delete require the, delete that. Line 40, I think that capital BY may need to be F instead of B.
Budget year, fiscal year.
For the purpose of this, I agree with the F.
Okay.
Using that.
On line 1, strike AN before appropriate, and then insert an S after amounts, appropriate amounts. Okay. Before that, let's go up. On line 40, after amending, insert the licensing caps under. It wasn't clear to me which caps we were talking about in this paragraph. I think I've got some more substantive suggestions about this paragraph as well. I'm not exactly sure this argument is strong enough, because I think we're trying to get our caps raised for a reason, but I think I probably need a little bit more time to work out that stronger argument, which I could have available for the next meeting.
Sarah, can you speak just conceptually as to what the additional rationale might be? Or if maybe it's just not captured clearly enough here.
Yeah, I think it's probably not captured very clearly. I have a lot of revisions to this paragraph, but my overall feeling was that this argument wasn't very strong.
Admittedly, it's not.
Yeah.
It's an opportunity, if anything, but the better the language, the more I would appreciate it, so.
I was thinking that it needed to be clear that what you were asking for was more the authority to start the regulatory process if it proved necessary.
Mhm.
And then I was thinking it might be nice to touch on the efforts to reduce the likelihood of needing to do that, that, you know, that you're going to, whatever efforts you're going to make to not need to do that, but it was part of being responsible to not also be in some kind of an emergency situation before the next sunset.
And I agree with adding all of that. In the consultation that we had with Vincent Shi, the assembly analyst, this was a kind of a no-brainer, if you will. I mean, when any institution gets to their statutory authority and hits that maximum, and it's appropriate that an increase at whatever, you know, point or time down the road would happen, that the legislature is sensitive to the idea that they need to make room for boards to exercise their regulatory authority. So again, it's adding the content can't do anything but help our argument, but it's something that they're used to seeing. They expect it.
So I think conceptually, this paragraph needs at least a sentence about the board being responsible and raising caps only as necessary. So, you know, just having one strong sentence there about why these caps need to be raised. And then the rest of that paragraph just needs to be tweaked so that it's probably shorter, but giving the general idea that the board would only actually raise the fees through a public rulemaking process. That's all.
So is the board okay with the idea of having just this issue 1 also included with Tara's restructure of the couple paragraphs above it, and we'll just bring it back to the next? I'm almost thinking that's probably going to be the case with issue number 2 also.
Well, issue 2, you actually all have the suggested language.
You showed us that yesterday.
But will this
Right.
paragraph need to be amended to address for what was decided on yesterday?
Yeah, what we see up on the screen is not reflective of what should be in there, but you
Yeah.
do actually have the
We'll be
language.
inserting what we approved yesterday.
Right.
Exactly. Yeah.
So the other 2,
I put your edits in here, so this is actually the
Oh.
language that was the handout from
So
yesterday.
if you scroll
oh,
down,
good.
we're going to be deleting number 2. That's coming out. Did anyone notice from the handout yesterday whether there were any additional revisions that need to be made? You know, whether it be technical or word choice?
I had a question about the timing of when the repeal takes place. Does it have to be a specific date, or can it be can it say once regulations have been adopted to address this, you know, that would address the
If it were that easy.
retired issue?
I don't think the legislature will approve that. I think they're going to want a date certain because that's what forces the board to take action.
Okay.
And I think it's also helpful to the board because when stakeholders come in at the last minute and want major changes, the board is being held to a specific deadline.
Okay.
But I think we do need to make revisions to the first sentence above 1 so that now we're just making a statement that the PTBC recommends addressing this issue by repealing.
become too long of a sentence by connecting it?
We could put a period after the 2019. And then just say this repeal or this, yeah, I'd probably just put repeal. This repeal would remove the existing unclear. Does that look okay? All right.
Vague retired status instead of unclear retired status?
Sorry, what was the edit? Unclear?
Vague instead of unclear?
Perhaps,
Or
Incomplete authority.
non-descriptive?
or
Fine.
right. That's interesting, because, the statute as a whole is unclear. It doesn't specifically give the board authority to establish. It doesn't say what this status really is, other than a way to get out of continuing education and a renewal fee. So, I think,
Okay.
Do you need both of those PTBC, like the first one, can it just say this repeal would remove the existing unclear retired and allow the PTBC to rely, you need that in there both times?
well, if we put in it and allow it to rely on, then we're really just referring back to the statute.
What about the first one? The first PTBC?
Right.
Sure, yeah, delete, yeah, the existing unclear. Perhaps in this next paragraph, since the existing retired license is, we could change unclear here to, is vague as to the, and then strike on, as to the PTBC's authority.
And is deficient in specifying?
Mhm.
This is pretty
Everywhere is vague and deficient.
Are we going to state anything after that last paragraph? Are we just saying we're repealing?
We're saying we think it should be included in the sunset review process. That's our conclusion.
Is that set up above there? I can't remember.
It just says new issues identified by the board. And in issue number 1, we actually,
Go down just a little bit.
Yeah, in issue 1, we're respectfully requesting.
yeah.
So issue 2 would just be the board is recommending.
And so you're saying that that's what you're finishing with, is that
Right. That's our conclusion, is we're recommending it be included.
Issue 3,
technical corrections to a cross-reference.
Under issue 4, will you scroll to the left a little so we can see the page or the line numbers? On line 22, after 2653, we need to strike that paren.
But can you just scroll up just a couple sentences, please? Is that sentence starting on 39, is it missing a verb? Is it?
Yeah.
No, because the verb
It's
is
all there?
later. The verb is on line 1, to demonstrate. The requirement to demonstrate. And then it goes on, it may be construed as, right?
I agree, it's pretty buried in.
You don't like my long sentences?
Most of the time we do.
And not being as on par as our resident wordsmith, I'm okay with it.
I think you're missing is.
I don't understand the sentence.
Where would you put the is?
Either right before to is to demonstrate or above the
Okay.
existing statutory requirement for foreign educated physical therapy applicants.
Well, if you skip over to, we'll cut it up. The existing statutory requirement
Is.
down to
foreign-
2 may be construed as, line 2. It skips down. No.
I think, yeah, that is supposed to be this. Is for foreign educated physical
Either there or.
If you want to change the sentence,
Yeah.
we can add is. The existing requirement, actually, it would need to change even more than that. So is the suggestion to break up the sentence?
Well, if you just move the existing statutory requirement for foreign educated people, okay. The requirement, what do you see, Deborah?
I see the existing statutory requirement may be construed as an unnecessary
Yeah.
barrier for
Yes.
foreign educated physical therapy applicants who have already, that might,
That's it.
It's just reading, it's cutting and moving the pieces of
as an unnecessary, not a necessary.
I was thinking
Let's catch that now.
Yeah.
catch that one.
and on this.
And then add, after barrier, to licensure in California, period, currently, comma, strike 4. So currently, for an educated physical therapy applicants who have already demonstrated, and then after, on line 2, after country, put after the comma, must also, and then strike 2. Must also demonstrate. And then, hold on, line 3, we need to delete may be construed as through the period.
And then
To address the problem, the PTBC pursued an exemption through regulatory process. Or initiated. Pursuit is good? Okay.
Yeah.
When you want to change, the Office of Administrative Law determined, take out AIs.
Yep.
It's interesting to kind of consider when this paragraph was written, of how this tense plays out.
So again, in this issue, we're stating the issue, and then we're stating what we're recommending to do, which we did in 1, but in issue 2, we're not stating what, like a blurb of what we want to do.
Issue 2 does have that. It's not currently on your version.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. One, I have to say I'm extremely impressed, and I actually have, I think my blood pressure has gone down by at least 20 points. So again, I think it's appropriate to take another break, and we'll come back and start at the beginning of the document. If there is anything that you've identified in your review since the last distribution, we can go through that and account for it.
So let's take a 15-minute recess and be back at 11:15. I'm sorry,
I think Jason's blood
11:10.
pressure just went up a little bit.
Thank you. All right, we're back from recess. The time is 11:11, and we're going to pick up at section 1.
So at this point in the review, the board as a whole has had a couple different opportunities to review the content, provide feedback, and staff has accounted for that feedback in this draft. So all of the edits that you've asked for in the past are now present and before you.
Okay, so starting with history of the board.
On line 15, inside that quote after act, we need a comma.
Function of the board. Profession of physical therapy.
On line 25, after and, we need to delete that comma.
Occupations licensed by the board.
I was just wondering why that one is underlined with no space between, I'm sorry. Jason?
It's okay. It's part of it will be addressed in the style guide. So subtitles and those kind of things will all be uniform.
makeup and functions of each of the board's committees.
I have some comments on the chart. So it looks like at the last row, vacancy, governor-appointed public member, I think that's me. And there's 4 more gray squares than there should be.
Okay, we'll confirm that.
We'll confirm.
Okay. And then, if nobody has any comments on the top there, then where it has the appointment dates and reappointment information, I have, I believe I was reappointed this year. I don't remember what exact date. And I think, Alicia, you were reappointed too.
Yeah, that's true, both.
And then Alicia's term, the expiration date on her term
Have to be updated.
needs to be updated.
Kaz is actually incorrect and still needs to be updated.
Yeah, my reappointment date is 6/1/2016.
That was last June, that was, your reappointment was last June? Okay, and your expiration would be 4 years after?
Correct.
Oh, also the dates at the top of the other chart for 16-17, the dates go from 16 to 10.
Oh, I see that. And those 2 charts are going to undergo a major formatting as well.
Okay.
Question 2. Question 3.
Line 28, before, or after report, comma, insert the, no, after, it's further in there. After the comma, the. On line 30, after constraints, comma. Line 7, strike addressing and insert to address.
Legislative actions.
Before we go to legislative action, so currently we had, or previously we had stated that we were going to be revisiting its strategic plan in 2018. The board could choose to address that in 2017. We don't have to wait as long as 2018. So I just wanted to take kind of a straw poll, if you will, on how they feel about shortly after dealing with sunset, then moving into the strategic plan process.
I'm game.
That's a good way to put it.
And this is after we received the comments from the legislature and our,
Yeah, I'm thinking
Report
third
is
or fourth
approved.
quarter of 2017.
sounds good?
No later than 2018?
I like that language better. The board's comfortable with no later than? Okay.
I'm going to scroll through all the legislation. Just let me know if there's any that you want me to stop at.
On line 20, after 18, insert hyphen.
Tense issue that this law eliminates, is that on that, where you just added the hyphen.
Where you just added the hyphen to make this law eliminated, the 18-week clinical requirement.
So eliminated the 18-week.
I would say that for consistency with some of the other provisions that are being listed, when we're talking about a law, we can use present tense, and if
Okay.
we're talking about the bill itself, we can use past tense.
These analyses were really captured in time.
Got it. Just to clarify something for me, the very last sentence of that, says, physical therapist assistant education programs may not include. I understand what we're trying to say, but
Oh, yeah.
that's not to say that they can't. Some may choose not to, because there are PTA programs that, in fact, have 18 weeks of clinical experience within their curriculum. Not to be picky, but
Mm-hmm.
just to make sure that we're not saying that they're prohibited from.
Yeah. Are not required to include 18 weeks of full-time clinical experience.
And I think there's a hyphen between the 18 and the weeks again. No?
Does that bring the clarity?
Yeah, I mean, we all knew what we were talking about this time, if somebody read that.
Right.
Are they, is there a statute that says they can't?
Right.
There are some.
There are some do.
Yeah.
Keep scrolling. Okay. On line 3, after authorization, add a comma. Hold on. Go back. To disclose to the patient. That's correct.
Regulatory actions.
I had one question on line 10 there. I thought all the regulations had those beginning of the quarter dates. Was that a special?
This one was effective on filing with the Secretary of State. For the
We filed for an emergent date, so
I just want to check that.
In the prior section? Oh, in the prior section, on the sort of space next to the numbers of each bill, it says sections effected, and then the next section, it says sections affected.
I think you could do, make a note to do a global change for all, yeah, all sections affected.
Question 4?
Oh, line 10, after licensees, period.
Should that, on number 4, should that be conducted by the board? Should board be capitalized or, describe any major studies conducted by the board?
I think that's fine.
Is that okay?
It's part of their original template, but
I would say that you're going to see a lowercase b throughout the document every time they're asking a question, so you would end up having to change all lowercase to higher case, and I don't know that it's necessary because it's direct from them.
the two sections prior, the legislation report and the regulation report, I think the legislature is going to get very used to seeing that format. 3 other boards have now adopted this particular type of formatting and reporting it, so maybe it will become part of the template at some point.
Line 32, after that, insert the 2 lines below, by, so it's line 34, discipline by, insert the. And then line 36, before PTBC, insert the.
Were we not going to include any other studies?
There was some debate as to whether we were going to add breeze in there, but after some kind of consideration and deliberation, other issues that might be considered, it was determined that we wouldn't include it as a study. We participated in a greater project.
Yeah.
Is probably the better way to describe it.
Question 5?
Go ahead, please.
One of the bullets asked to list committees, workshops, working groups, et cetera. Do we need to do that?
I think essentially we have. So the wellness symposium and those kind of things are already included.
For question 5, for the national associations.
This is FSBPT.
You're talking about participation of members and administrators in subcommittees of the Federation?
Yeah. I mean, I'm just wondering if we need to be specific in answering that bullet, or if the way we answered it in the body of the paragraph is fine.
I think at this time, the content of the paragraph is sufficient.
I had a comment on the second sentence of paragraph 2. At the end of line 21, it says delegates elected by each state board. Aren't they jurisdictions?
Correct.
How do you want, just jurisdictions?
Tara, for clarity's sake and considering the audience, state/jurisdiction.
So is it a state jurisdiction?
Well, so we have to keep in mind Puerto Rico Virgin Islands, those kind of things, where they're still represented in this federation, but they don't fall under the definition of a state.
Well, I guess I'm reading this jurisdiction board. Sounds weird.
Yeah.
Do they actually
How about
have-
member?
There you go.
Yeah.
Member board.
Member takes away some of the authority. Indication for me.
Jurisdictional,
Board?
I would rather see, yeah, state/jurisdictional board.
but with an AL.
I had some comments on this table. So on the top of this next page here, Orlando needs to come down so that it's flush with the 2015 annual meeting.
I also wanted to ask, I think for Ms. Taki, the 2013, she did not attend that. That was during I think that was still the no alternate. She was the alternate, but I didn't know I don't know if it mattered.
San Antonio?
Yeah, no, she didn't go. I don't think.
She was there.
It's my memory then.
I had to go back and look, though.
I don't remember her there.
Yeah, she was.
Would there be any confusion of why an alternate delegate has attended meetings when up above it doesn't mention that at all? Would that matter?
No, I think given the question itself, I think it would still be of interest who and when.
Any additional changes in section 1?
I'll make a note to go back and look at that, though.
I might suggest let's see, can you scroll up to, stop, line 22, I'm sorry, 27. Yes, 27. Convening of the Assembly of Delegates where policy of the FSBPT is determined rather than is voted on. Because if it's voted up, then then it becomes. If it's voted down, then it doesn't become. But overall, it's where policy is determined.
Can you go back to that sentence again? So does it need the comma after determined?
I might actually end the sentence with that and just make it a period and then say the annual meeting also includes educational sessions. Or either the annual meeting or just the meeting also.
On line 29, can we then take out also
Yeah.
before attends?
No.
Okay, section 2.
Line 28. That paragraph, I think, needs to move so that it's right before the tables. And then, will you scroll back up? Hold on, go back down a little bit. Okay, so line 6. Starting with since the outcomes of consumer complaints are dependent upon the facts of each case, the cases may be resolved in favor of the licensee. I appreciate the information the sentence is delivering, but I don't think it makes sense in this paragraph because ultimately I think we can get at the same point through the prior sentence. So notably, complaints closed for insufficient evidence or without merit are more likely to result in dissatisfaction. It seems like it gets to the point. People are complaining because the complaint didn't go farther. There was no disciplinary action. Does anyone disagree?
And it would be dissatisfaction for the complainant, not
Right.
everybody would be dissatisfied with that.
Sure. So perhaps we could put result in the complainant's dissatisfaction. That might be a little more succinct.
Not complainers.
So do an apostrophe S.
Looks weird to me. It's
Yeah.
complainants, right? Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so take out that last apostrophe.
I had a question about this table. The percentages in the columns don't equal 100. So perhaps, as seen in the following table, you have a row that says total answered.
Below this table is a secondary table, and you'll see the formatting of that. So you have total answers, and you'll have the 16, and the numbers are going to be calculated. I'd like to apply this formatting to the above data.
Okay.
And I think that'll address that issue.
Cool, thank you.
Was there anything else on section 2? Any edits?
Because even if one person answered, it'd be 100%.
Table 2 of that, I didn't know whether this was worth pulling out as context for it, but on question number 3 of the second table, 68% thought the process was well explained. If I kind of make that as a highlight. And then for question 6, 73+% thought the staff was courteous and helpful. Don't know if it was just starting.
of the limitations of the information that you have.
Yeah.
Question 4, there's a slash instead of a point in 12.5. And then above that, where you have the fiscal years, it may be uniform with either the dash or the slash.
Deborah, on your last discussion about highlighting the positive results of the second survey, were you contemplating adding a sentence before these tables? Because the question actually is discuss the results. So I think we could add a sentence.
For example, you have something where it says of the 16 surveys received, 38% were satisfied.
Right.
And I would almost expand on that and include.
Right, so, yeah, make a note to include, it was how well was the process explained?
Yeah, question 3 and question 6. I think you can include the 2 top categories of each of those. The good and very good.
Could I also add a comment just for context? Those numbers are pretty big. Maybe if those percentages, I would just suggest we actually give them the N. 38%, that really was 6 responses. 44%, that was really 7 responses. Just to remind them. Right.
Do we have to? It
Well,
seems
we
to
don't
me
have-
like we're kind of already telling them that the number's pretty low. The total number's
Right.
only 16, but of that 16, we've got, 78%.
If somebody's a percentage person, they go, wow, this is like a 50-50 deal. Why are we not doing better? The N is very small. We have 16 respondents. I mean, just a comment. I can go either way.
Are you saying that you think by providing like the number 6 would actually make these percentages look better? That's my question. Yeah.
Perhaps, yeah.
I'm trying to find if we have, where do we say the number of complaints that have been processed?
The number of surveys that have been turned in?
No, not the number of surveys
Number of
received.
complaints in the
number of
enforcement report.
complaints. Okay. And so I don't know because part of the challenge is highlighting that we just haven't gotten
Right.
responses.
Right.
And I don't know if we restate here that how many complaints we had, but we only received this many responses to the survey.
Right. And I think we can adjust that with the reformatting of the data in the
Okay.
table, because it'll have that total answered.
Good,
Total
okay.
surveys received. I like that too, because not on surveys, they don't always answer all the questions. So for each category, while we might have received 22 surveys, each question will actually be represented in the number of people that answered it,
Right.
instead of leaving a blank.
I want to echo my support for using numbers instead of percentages on that sentence as well, that Dr. Dominguez pointed out.
Well, actually, I was just suggesting we give them both.
Yeah. But I do like the number, yeah.
It'd be consistent with the formatting in the table.
section 3.
I noticed too.
Down here.
It's really small. To match the table. So 4.2 turns to 3.3. And then 1819 changes to 1718. That's all I have. I just need it to match the table.
On line 21, after over, insert a hyphen.
Actually, I do have a question. Liz, that thing you just changed, are we in 1617?
15, 16.
That's what we're in right now?
No, right now we're in 16, 17.
Isn't that why I had the 4.2?
Yes, and so to be consistent with the reporting, we were doing 15, 16 for the 4 years.
So should it not say current? Maybe the 15, 16 level reserve was 3.3?
I'll make a note of it.
Okay.
Throughout the report, it's consistent, like as far as we're talking about current, it's because I was addressing 15, 16 as current. That's fine. It works either way.
It's always the difficulty in this report. Current is really, you have to kind of take into consideration of where it is located in the report, because the report is specifically asking for data that occurred within that period. There are highlights, there are things that, you want to kind of state because they're either in support of or identify or highlight a problem, where you speak outside of the range that they're asking for in the report. I think either one is appropriate. It's just dependent on what the board would like.
Brooke, will you change the hyphen for 2015-16 to a, what is that, a forward slash?
In line 22, I'm wondering if, for emphasis, if we said, historically, the PTPC has had to overexpend its personnel services and enforcement budgets. Otherwise, it makes it look like we did because we wanted to,
responsible.
in a way, and we weren't responsible. But this is that way with these words. To me, it emphasizes that it was
appreciate
beyond our control.
And can we go back to the first paragraph that Deborah brought up, please? Because now I'm confused about that. So we're stating where we are currently, not fiscal year 2015-16. We're talking about right now.
We're talking about 15, 16.
Even though the questions describe the board's current reserve level spending,
Which kind of goes back to my response before.
Sorry.
It's just a matter of choice. If the board wants to stick to the formatting, or this is one of those times where, given, I think, what the question that the legislature is asking, and an opportunity to state what it is outside of the range at the time of this reporting, And so currently, either way, if you'd like to see it with today's data or the data submission, which is going to be the same, we could use that.
I'm reading the question as they're asking us where we are right now.
And I'm okay using whichever number you want, but if you say current and I look at the table, I look at 16, 17. So
Yep.
So if you want to report 15, 16,
Yeah.
that's fine. Just
And it-
tell me that's what you're looking at.
And it kind of goes, the drafting of this report is a very long process. We received this information and started crafting this report in last fiscal year. So,
Yep.
yeah. And so when you say currently, that's where it kind of gets dicey. Currently when you read it, or currently when it was written, currently when the data was collected.
Well, at what point in time was our reserve 4.2 months?
Right now.
Right now?
That's projected though.
Projected.
So it
Yeah.
hasn't changed.
At the end of the fiscal year, so the end of the year we're in now.
So to answer the question, would it be better to say current reserve, current projected reserve for, and then specify the year?
I think that there's an opportunity that the board can take advantage of, if you will, by using current how you see fit.
I think if you stick to the 2015, 2016, which is the 3.3, then it fixes it to the last financial year, as I'm understanding this. The last financial year, which is all of that information is compacted into it. If you pull it forward, then you're going to projected numbers.
There is a possibility that through the process, the discussion process and through the hearing process before the committee, that if we had chosen to do this 15, 16 and put the 3.3, the question could arise, where is that now? You know, and then we'd be able to report an increase at that point.
And
So that it kind of speaks to the idea of, is it captured within the 15, 16 year, or is it current as the date of submission?
I would still
Up to you.
prompt them for that question. And it would allow us an opportunity to speak to that in however way we want to.
Can it read the has an anticipated fiscal year 2015-16 reserve level, which with a projected reserve level, can it say anticipated?
So if the board would like to, we can address current by changing, the PTBC had a reserve level of 4.2 fiscal year, am I going too fast? Reserve level 4.2 months. In fiscal year 15-16, and projects a reserve level of what was the other one?
It's the last.
4.2
Yeah,
I'm
is,
trying to think, I don't have the,
4.2 is a projection as well, isn't it?
I'm sorry, so that would be 3.3.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what I was. Just going down, projects reserve level of, what was it before, 4.2? Reserve level of 4.2. In fiscal year 16-17. And we can either do and 4.8 months ending 17-8, and we have everything for the table. Would that work?
I still see strategically as that being a great opportunity to introduce many issues that we want to present further. One being the 3.3 is, out of the 2015-16, we're projecting a 4.2, and that was because of, the increase in the revenue, and there is currently a cap on that. And then that's why we would be asking for something in the future to increase those caps. It just allows a strategic point to pause and have a conversation that is kind of seeding into the future of other things that we would want to ask. I just think it's a great opportunity because it's just the way women literally presenting the information. If we don't do that and we go with, putting it, there's a lost opportunity to speak to a point. When it comes to finances, I think it's always best to present in words. Also, it makes a powerful impact. Just a suggestion.
The other advantage of 3.3 for 15-16 is that it's a real number. It's not a projection.
Yeah.
It's something that the legislature's used to seeing in this issue. They don't really need to see it kind of shook out in this report. It might come up again in the discussion or the hearing, but and And then the 4.2 is a projection for fiscal year 16-17, but it's early into the fiscal year to make that projection. That projection could change over time as well.
Yeah.
I have a question as to how that number increases when we look at the next paragraph that says we're short. We're still struggling and we're shuffling things around and trying to cover. And so how do we say that our reserve continues to grow, but we haven't been able to address our shortfalls?
So the projections really do kind of create issues when trying to make those estimates, because as we do a projection now, it's really contained within this fiscal year. What we're not accounting for is the next fiscal year's increases in things like pro rata and expenditure costs for state reimbursement and that kind of thing. So it is this, the numbers don't always jive, if you will. And so it does make the argument pretty difficult.
Or or it makes it easy actually. The 3.3 I would use as, these are actual numbers and these are projections. And just by stating that in our current reality, we still have all of these, not the funds that we need to. That describes the bottom part of what Dr. Drummond just explained. And if you point more validity to what is the current reality than to the projections.
As I see the template as it's handed out, and typically, through the sunset process, we would have received this template during last year, fiscal year. We didn't get it until the beginning of this fiscal year. But with the legislature asking us to report up to the 15-16 fiscal year, and they're looking for that. If we're going to use current, and you're going to use current in its literal term, then we shouldn't use a projection. We should use, at the time of this reporting, if you're going to try that. Other than that, current should be whatever is reported for 15-16.
I just want it to say 15-16.
Yeah.
I don't want it to say current.
Yeah.
If you want to use that number, I'm okay with it.
Yeah.
As long as we're being clear that it's 15-16.
Yeah. My preference is deferred to the board. I'm comfortable with stating this as an empirical, real number that was recorded during that fiscal year. And at the end of 15-16, the fund reserve was 3.3.
I'm with that.
Let's answer the question. Huh? Yeah.
So, hold on.
But the question is also, I understand the concern about what current means, but we're also doing some things where we're providing as current of information as we can.
Yeah.
And so if you have a projection, I think you could state that and explain its
You could
limitations.
offer the empirical first and then follow it up with a clarification through projection.
Is the projection based on the last expenses, the last year's expenses, or are anticipated increases in expenses included in developing the projection?
It's a combination of both. As you go through the budget report and you look at expenditures, there are some things that you could just baseline off of previous expenditures.
Right.
But things that tend to fluctuate more, AG and DFI is a good example, they'll baseline off of the first quarter.
Although you may have received this material back then, this report ends up with a date on it, right? So when we say current, I think we just need to be clear. Because it'll have a date of whatever, December 1st or whatever it is.
So does this revision, though, do that for you? Will that work?
No, because
Okay.
it includes projections. It's not saying what it is.
Yeah.
And if the question doesn't ask for projections, then don't include projections.
Yeah.
include what we know it is,
You're still kind of stuck with the conflict of putting out a publication that uses the word current that's, consumed by stakeholders, consumers, and that kind of thing. And maybe this, what's the word, discrepancy between the 15-16 numbers and whatever you might put in as currently collected, or just using 15-16. The sunset report will be for since last sunset through fiscal year 15-16.
And if we want to use the word current in this sentence, and then we say fiscal year 15-16, because that captures what we're interpreting current as, without including projections.
So are we leaving the word out, the current word out, or do you want both? So PTBC had a current reserve level of 3.3 months in fiscal year 15-16, so we're identifying that that is current. So there's no confusion, because I totally get what Deborah's saying.
I agree, no projections, just leave it at 15-16. If they want to ask, then we can provide that information
Well, it's in the
upon
table.
request. And it's in the table, there you go.
The sentence that follows it also makes sense with it. So that increase in the fund that we saw at the end of fiscal year 15-16 had more to do with the general fund loan repayment than it did with any revenues collected as a result of a fee increase.
I'm wondering, though, if we now need to add some modifying language in that second sentence, because it doesn't, I'm not sure if it makes sense. What increase are we talking about now? Because if we strike the projected reserve levels that look like the increases, now we're talking about an increase that we don't actually have in the
Right.
document.
You can't
So-
see the increase, you would really have to refer back to 14-15.
Right, so perhaps,
So it changes.
it may be, this number is an
Yeah.
increase from FY 2014-15.
Yeah, the .9 month
Something
reserve
from-
in fiscal year 14-15.
I can do some changes, and if the board's okay with it, we can present it at the next meeting.
An increase in the reserve level resulted from,
Are we leaving it at that? Because I think it needs a little bit more modifier.
Yeah, we're going to rework it, right?
Yeah,
Great.
we
And
could
bring
work
it
it out.
back.
We could work it out here, or we can take it back and come back with better language for the 28th.
I think that way you might be able to have a little bit more time to look at the numbers and see if this is exactly capturing current plus intent, your intent.
Okay.
How you guys feeling? When you want to finish this table and break for lunch, or finish the section and break for lunch?
I don't see a setup yet, so they might be taking our cue from yesterday to not set up lunch until, is it there? Oh, I'm sorry. They moved it. Straw poll.
Let's just finish this part at least.
By part, do you mean the table or the section?
Yeah. At least the table.
Okay.
Okay, so question 10.
Question 11.
Sorry, Brooke. Before the table, trying to find it. On line 19, or actually starting from 18, the PTBC determined the fees charged to applicants and licensees for licensure would not sustain ongoing program operations.
And then in line 23, I think we had previously said that we projected a 4.2 month reserve. No, for 17, 18?
It's 4.8.
It was 4.8, okay.
It's right below in that table.
How do you feel about that currently, Deborah?
It's currently a projection for the future.
I think it's a better place for that to be stated.
That's what that projection looks like right now.
Correct.
That makes sense to me.
I have to ask again, why are we including the projection? Because the question doesn't ask for the projection for reserves.
Right.
The question here talks about, I'm sorry, if a deficit is projected to occur
Right.
regarding fee changes. So if we're not expecting a deficit to occur, then I don't know that we need to necessarily state that we're anticipating a positive reserve level at all.
But I think it does show that if we are asking for a raise in our statutory caps, that we do have reserves and that would justify us not increasing our fees, just the caps.
Was this data?
I'm not bothered by that part of it, providing it. But I appreciate it. It doesn't follow the line of the questioning completely, but even if we were just to answer that we don't anticipate any change at all, to substantiate the reason why we don't anticipate any change at all is projected, we're at 4. I mean, I see it working either way.
Question 11.
I think we're pausing for lunch. So why don't we take a recess for lunch? Did you guys want to do a working lunch or?
So just on the, did we do the table?
Oh, no.
So
Let's do the table.
because I want to do something for where we, under fiscal year 16, 17 and 17, 18, to somehow say that these are projected.
Yeah.
Asterisk footnote?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
And then just to clarify, these are dollars and thousands?
This one is
Dr. Dominguez?
This one's correct. We have others coming though.
Jason, I'm guessing you'd like a working lunch?
You've restored my faith in humanity at this point. I would leave that to Madam President to make.
I think there's a couple members who are going off campus for lunch.
Could I suggest a compromise, like a shorter lunch?
Okay.
And if it turns into a little bit of working for some people that are eating? that would
So
be-
let's set a time, maybe.
How long do you think you need, Dr. Drummer, to run and get a sandwich and come back?
If I need to come back to you, I'll get it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can I get it to go, do you think?
Oh, yeah, you can.
Okay,
I have some strategies for you, too, to find the shortest line in Philippe's.
thank you.
Off the record, though. Okay, so we'll come back then at 12:45? All right, thank you.
Yeah.
So Philippe-